All right, thanks very much for that. And always hard to follow Liam, but I'm, pleased to be here and happy to host our investor panel. I got one goal, which I didn't tell you guys. Sorry, but my goal is for us to find lots of disagreement here. So the rule is we don't have to agree with each other. It's not impolite to have different schools of thought, because I think this whole area and this whole industry is all about disagreements and uncertainty and nobody being exactly sure, what the right answers are. So let me introduce, we've got Ophelia here from Index Ventures. We've got Michiel, a partner at Accel. And we've got Simon with Bitcoin Capital, an author of Bank to the Future. So we're very lucky to have you three. Thank you very much for making time. And can we kick off with just tackling on a big picture level? Some people say with absolute certainty, it's not about the currency, this is about it being a technology. Other people say it's not about, this actually is a currency, it's going to replace the banks. Where do you sit? How do you feel? Have your views changed over the last couple of years? And I'll let whoever wants to kick off.
Okay, well, firstly, I'm a little bit scared being called a VC, if anyone knows me. That's right, the first time I've been called that, but we did just launch a fund called Bitcoin Capital, so I guess that's what I say.
Did you say?
Yeah.
It's not that bad.
But, having been around Bitcoin from very early on, I'm still a big fan of Bitcoin, and I can't stand the buzz phrase, hate Bitcoin, love blockchain. Tends to come from bankers, tends to come from people new to the sector. And I do believe that there's a lot in the blockchain, and there's lots of interesting things like we've just seen with diamonds. But Bitcoin is still the largest supercomputer in the world, and the only decentralized one that's working at scale, and one of the most significant assets and inventions we've ever seen. So I think that most of the interesting blockchains are going to be attached to Bitcoin, but there's also user cases for all private stuff, and we're looking to invest in both.
Sorry, can you guys do a quick introduction of who you are and what you do, so we can get a bit of background?
Yeah, sure. Do you want to tie that in with your answer?
Yeah, please.
How about that?
Okay. So yeah, I think the nice thing about the whole Bitcoin and blockchain is that people don't know, and that makes it a very exciting area to work in. It makes it a very exciting area to invest in. It's always good if the rest of the world calls you crazy. That's kind of where a lot of innovation happens. And I don't think it's controversial here to say that we see a lot of opportunity on both sides. I think the good and the bad news is I think no one knows. I think a lot of people have interesting ideas around it, but I think the bets you want to take are in both directions. And kind of tying it to what we do, we're a large global VC with presence in Asia, the US, and here, and our investments in Bitcoin so far have been Circle and KNC Miner. And I think that the second one really ties into this whole idea. Is like, we don't know what kind of use case is going to be successful. We do know that these guys will be involved, whatever it is.
Hi everyone, my name is Ophelia. So if you heard from my fund with Index Ventures, we started about 20 years ago.
Can you please speak up?
Sorry, speak up.
Yeah, please.
We started about 20 years ago. We opened the first office in Geneva and now have the main office in London and the fastest growing office in San Francisco, which we opened in 2011. We invest all the way from seed through to late stage. So we have two funds. We have an early stage venture fund and a later stage growth fund. And we've always been active investors in financial services. We have about 15 or 17, I think at the last count, investments in the space. So obviously hugely excited about both Bitcoin and the blockchain. So we've made two investments. The first is Zappo, which is a storage facility, and BitPay, which is enables merchants to process Bitcoin transactions. So Jess, I don't think it's an either or. I think both are very early in their infancy. Obviously what kind of began at the beginning with all the hype was Bitcoin and its potential as a currency, but what we've seen is that we still have huge challenges with consumer adoption. And so I think the hype has kind of slowed over the last year, and you can see that in what's happened with the Bitcoin price. But meanwhile, everyone's getting very, very excited about the potential use cases of the blockchain and what we've even moved from Bitcoin 1.0 to Bitcoin 2.0, and that's what everyone's now talking about. But as Michiel says, the potential for both are huge, and I think that's why we see so excited and
you want to add on, Simon? I know we didn't give you a chance to actually introduce yourself before as a new VC identifier.
Okay, well, I'm most known in the banking reform space. I left investment banking in 2006 to discuss how banks become sustainable. And that was pre-Bitcoin, and then Bitcoin came along, so I spoke at the first quick conference, solved a lot of the issues that we were talking about, and just been delighted to see the space grow and invest in the sector, run an equity crowdfunding platform, looking to get as much funding into more interested in the things that make banks less significant than make them commit crime in a cheaper way.
All right, so I heard something funny for the first time yesterday in terms of, okay, the banks are obviously getting much more interested and dedicating more resource, right, to figuring out what's going on here. Do you guys see with, say, UBS, launching their kind of blockchain innovation space, and Barclays obviously making a number of announcements, some with some of our, Bitcoin and blockchain companies coming out of the accelerator. Do you guys see this way of making it more interesting to invest in startups with the big banks paying attention? Or is there a sense of, the banks are going to wind up doing this themselves and not partnering with startups anymore once they get smarter?
So I think, I'm quite opinionated on this topic. It's a lot of PR from the banks at the moment. They're all kind of looking at it, not really understanding it, thinking that innovation teams are the way to try and understand what potential applications there are. In fact, really, there's only one bank that has actually built something meaningful. I think that's LHV in Estonia, which came out with their Cuba technology a couple of weeks ago to enabling free fiat currency transfer. But really, we haven't seen, banks make a push into it like we have entrepreneurs. And I think in the same way that, in the wake of the financial crisis, prior to that, entrepreneurs were trying to sell their technologies to banks and then realized post-2008, actually we can sell direct to consumers and do a far better job of it. I think that people using Bitcoin and blockchain are realizing the same, that they've got a leaps and starts and bounds ahead of the banks. And so I'm not scared that they're going to destroy any innovation.
I see the opposite. I think, as we've seen in alternative financial services like Funding Circle or Osprey, as soon as the banks can move into the space, they win. They haven't gone there either. No, so I think overall, I fully agree with you that the real innovation is coming from the startups, and that's, so I don't think there's a fear factor there. I think the opposite is true, though, that it really helps that banks are starting to pay attention, because one of the main kind of drivers of innovation in the ecosystem is adoption, and I think it'll help with kind of popularizing Bitcoin. I think also there's a lot of pent-up capital in banks that kind of likes to participate, so if that drives up coin prices, it will help with distribution, it will help with interest. And then kind of finally, I think there's a number of regulatory hurdles and kind of connection points to the normal financial system where starting entrepreneurs have a really hard time kind of working on these barriers. So in KNC, we just launched the first Bitcoin ETN, kind of making the on-ramp possible of kind of institutional investors into Bitcoin, but did that with the help of NASDAQ. So I think those type of partnerships and those type of leverages can make a real big difference.
So I think banks are serious about this. In the first instance, they'll be supporting Bitcoin companies. And we all know what a challenge it is for a Bitcoin company to get even a banking account at the moment. And that's disappointing. They're really serious about this. And they should be supporting more innovation. And they're looking at these companies going, well, you're not adding anything to our P&L. It's more risk and a headache than it's worth anything to us today. So we won't support you.
But I think, like in remittances, what you're seeing with banks figuring it out, it's good if someone focuses within the banks, and they'll set the rules of the game. It's the excess possible.
I think you've got the exact point there, that if they were interested in supporting the sector, they'd give the step out of the way and just give SMEs and startups in the space of bank accounts. Because they're not doing that, but yet they are investing or putting them in their incubators. It's probably looking for an acquisition to eliminate, which is good for the VC model, I guess, or acquisition to gobble up and make sure that they're keeping an eye on the innovation. That's my personal view.
Do we want audience participation here, or do we want to mix things up?
2 points. First point, the funding circle example.
Yeah.
More than 80% of the liquidity in peer-to-peer lenders comes from banks. So banks are still making all the money in peer-to-peer lending.
And governments.
And governments, and yeah, exactly. And a lot of it's actually seeing high-frequency trading and creating other dark pools, but now with innovation. So there's going to be a real big headache when it comes to the peer-to-peer lenders in the near future. So it's a lesson from banks.
I'd turn that around. I would say it's an interesting example where the banks couldn't do the lending at this scale, at this kind of cost, to these kind of smaller kind of SMEs and individuals, if you look at Lending Club, for example. But the models kind of took on turbo scale when other parts of capital kind of were made available. So I think it's kind of this way where the innovation has to come from the startups, but some fuel can be added to the fire by the collaboration.
Also, the peer-to-peer model is less profitable than creating money and issuing credit out of nowhere, which is the banking model.
Indeed, but it's also a model that allows you to bring on new customers and manage that liquidity in a different way. So the second point was around the bank accounts. It's nothing to do with any political view. It's to do with the fact that it's the people who have to make that decision are in a position of losing their jobs with no regulatory certainty. Yeah. So if your job depends on not messing up, you really don't want to mess up. And actually, there is somebody who sits there, looks at a piece of paper, and you spend a lot of time really working with that person to get them to where they need to be, and there's no blank check that they can get from the regulator or from the Bank of England or from the government that says in 5 years this won't be a £500 billion fine that puts the company out of business. So there's a lot of homework that needs to be done on that. It's not a philosophical point. Actually, I think there's Dan from Innovate Finance made the point earlier. In the UK, the government and the regulator are bending over backwards to support the sector, and a lot of the banks are too. They just can't get that homework really squared away yet with the existing regulatory system. Bitcoin is a weird animal, right? So
yeah, if I could add just a couple more points on that. And I'm someone who's sort of currently in a sort of poacher-turned-gamekeeper role, having pioneered an anonymous digital cash payment system in the late 90s, all predicated on the pre-authorized debit in a SIM compartment on the SIM card, predicting the death of banks and the death of notes and coins almost 18 years ago. So I'm now back working in the bank, thinking things through. I've matured a little bit. And I think there's a couple of points. The first, and see the most important one, is there isn't a meaningful enough market yet to attract major attention from the bank. A lot of the things that we talk about, innovations, Apple placements, is a MasterCard standard tokenization process using a simple UX, use a biometric feature, sending transactions over an existing banking infrastructure. So the majority of innovations are at a surface level of consumer engagement. And the things that potentially can threaten the foundations, yes, these potentially, there isn't yet a market for them. 80% of the cash out of Bitcoin is happening, as we know, in Asia, for reasons that have got nothing to do with economic justification and anything to do with the political circumstances in which they operate.
Yeah, but the counter to that is 10 years ago, no one had a computer in their pocket every day, and now everyone does, and everything is different. So
it's not
the fact that it's not here doesn't mean it's not close.
No, and we're watching now, but we're not.
And that's what we're investing in.
But inaction isn't a function of timidity, right? A function of economy.
All right, let's move down the path of that. And congratulations, a disagreement. Let's take that point. Meaningful markets. You guys are seeing a lot of people asking for money, wanting you to invest. You're probably seeing lots of things from all across the industry. What types of opportunities are getting you really excited? And at the same time, not to be negative, but what types of opportunities make you like roll your eyes and go, oh my God, not again? Either way, love, hate.
I think clearly the hard part about getting blockchain and Bitcoin investments right is timing. You really don't know when this inflection point will hit, and obviously you don't know if it will hit, but your gamble is that it will hit because that's why we're investing in the trend. But so I think for that reason, companies that have a very high cost base and have a beautiful plan and it all works out well, if the adoption is super fast, but if timing is different, they don't work. That for me is a big trigger point that I like to avoid.
So I think we're seeing some really interesting, on the blockchain side, some really interesting enterprise application cases. And the thing that really excites me is when you don't have to know that it's the blockchain that can this application. I think, good luck to you if you're trying to sell an application in the way you have to sit in a sales pitch to like Silverbank or whoever it is that you're selling to, and you have to go into the details of the blockchain because adoption is going to be very slow. But if you can present something which has beautiful UI, beautiful front end, that just works seamlessly and solves a real need, and that's what you do.
Well, maybe I'll just go through some of the things we've invested in. Why?
Yeah, go for it.
So the first investment, well, my partner made in the fund was BitPay in the seed round, and we just come in with the next round as well. That was because at that point, that was the first mass consumer adopting application. I remember it was Tony Galippi pitching to 40 geeks in a room in 2010, look what he's done. So, just invested in BitPayza, which is integrating the M-Pesa network with Bitcoin to open up global transactions to Africa, which is just such an exciting market to open up. Shapeshift, we just invested in. What they do is they allow you to exchange digital assets in the fastest, most simple way without having an account or anything. They had to move to Switzerland and ban New York in order to make it happen, to allow to have great consumer experience rather than what they needed to do. That was off the philosophy that in the future every single asset class will probably be attached to a blockchain in the future. We've already seen with diamonds, and therefore you need a really easy way of exchanging those, and Shapeshift has got that. Factum we just invested in, they're leveraging the Bitcoin blockchain to bring blockchain as a service to people. So all of you that are having all these thoughts of how can we use blockchains, they're creating a really easy way of putting yourself on the Bitcoin blockchain. And we're analysing lots of other deals. I'm mostly interested in the peer-to-peer side, so how you get every individual to be their own bank rather than having some kind of centralised thing in the middle that creates banking on the blockchain again, really, where they have to store all the data and put everyone's data at risk again. So I'm more interested in those.
All right, I know we ended a poll, but let me just ask real quick, how many people here work in banks? All right, so I want you guys to speak to these people that just had their hands up. How should they be feeling?
I think they should be feeling exciting, and I think they should be able to spot the right kind of opportunities and then start a company, leave the bank, and then take the and come to us for money.
Are you free after?
That's what I'm here.
Can I follow up on that last point about the banks, not rebuilding banking on the blockchain? Because I think that's a philosophical point, but I don't know if it's an economic point that bears through. So the vast majority, more than 97% of value movement around the world is a liability, it's not an asset. So most money isn't cash. If I give you something, it's not like giving cash where the value is settled immediately. You have that coin and you could often spend it. Bitcoin operates as a bearer asset, i.e. as soon as I've moved to Bitcoin, its value is settled at the other side of the world. The vast majority of trade finance, how economics has evolved, and that's the market that's driven that. That's not been something that the banks have forced. That's happened largely outside of the banks that just provided services to that market. Have existed in a world that are liability backed, i.e. you trust somebody because there's no proof of ownership. You don't own this thing, right? And that's what the economy is now largely predicated on. People don't own a thing, they take out debt against the thing. Now, if you wanted to remove debt from society, Bitcoin is an interesting way to do that, but actually will consumers and corporates adopt that? And is that what's holding back the adoption of Bitcoin? Because it's assuming a bearer instrument is the right answer.
I think I've got some experience there, because the fund we just set up, we actually pay our investors dividends in Bitcoin. And most of the people are new adopters that wanted to get involved in this and have a punt on this asset class. And yeah, the amount of questions we get about what wallet should I set up, and then we tell them, well, it's actually more secure to take care of your own security. But if you don't want to do that, then use Coinbase type thing. So yeah, we've got experience of that, and I think there's the true benefit of Bitcoin comes when you decide to take ownership of your own security, But do mass consumers want to do that? Absolutely not, and they never will.
Absolutely.
All right, it's going to be from the audience. Who's our lucky last question? Yes.
Okay.
Sold.
John Matonis, previously with Bitcoin Foundation.
What's your title today?
I'd be interested in hearing from the VCs, Simon included. What is it that you see as the end game for your Bitcoin investments? So leaving aside the private blockchain aspect, on the Bitcoin blockchain aspect, you have two people who have invested in BitPay, you have Circle, and you have Zappo. I mean, is the end game something like coexistence with national currencies, or are you pursuing kind of like a Twitter, Facebook, Google model where you just get massive scale, massive users, and you figure out how to monetize it later?
So we've invested in a range of things. Ideologically, I'd love for our companies to be exiting on an IPO on the blockchain in the next few years. That's what I'd ideologically like to see. But we also invest in BitPay because we're sure that they're going to be gobbled up by some kind of financial institution in the next few years. So we're trying to get a combination of ROI in the traditional world and ROI in the world that we're also trying to build. And I think that's also reflective of where I think Bitcoin's going. To me, Bitcoin is a tremendously useful asset, a currency. I use it, I get paid in it. I go around the world, I use my Bitcoin debit card, I withdraw cash. It's a hybrid world that I use at the moment. But if there was ways of using Bitcoin without converting it and using a debit card, I would, and I'd love to see that work forward. But in the future, my philosophy is that I believe that we'll move to a world where what gets funded reflects the values of society, and what currency used reflects the values of the user. And there'll be lots of different currencies and lots of different asset classes and lots of different ways of exiting businesses. More choice and more complications for people.
I don't think fiat currency is going anywhere in the near term, in the next 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. Any of us were thinking about at the time when we made these Bitcoin investments. But what we do believe is that Bitcoin is going to take off and it's going to be a huge market and people are going to transact in it on a daily basis. And so the thesis was, let's invest in the infrastructure and the tools that are going to enable the growth of this market. And Bitcoin's already monetizing it, and it's already monetizing. So I don't think it's one of these things that you wait for them to somehow think about how they're going to make money. They do. So hopefully volumes will increase over time. And yeah, it's Simon says one day Bitcoin will hopefully be IPOing rather than being acquired.
Yeah, I think for me the last point is kind of there's a number of kind of more traditional investments you do where you say, listen, we're looking at this enterprise company, we think it could be acquired by this or this kind of party, it needs a minimal scale of that, do I see a path, blah, blah, blah. In this case, we're really betting on something taking off and a major change happening. And the degree to which the major change is happening determines the outcome path. So I think we've done these investments more from a philosophical belief that this could be huge. And if it hits, then the world will look differently. There'll be other players and we'll see where it ends up. And very deliberately saying, well, we've kind of targeted towards this, that, or
All right, great question to end on. Thank you very much. Thanks you guys for taking the time.